It began with a boy in El Paso, born into violence and shaped by secrets no child should witness. Before the world knew the name Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez's path toward terror was already set, fueled by brutality at home and a chilling fascination with evil. How does an ordinary childhood become the breeding ground for one of history's most feared predators? The answer starts here. Richard Ramirez was born on February 29, 1960, the youngest of 5 children in El Paso, Texas. His parents, Mexican immigrants Mercedes and Julian Ramirez, struggled to keep their family afloat in a neighborhood marked by poverty and violence. Julian, a former police officer turned railway worker, was known for his explosive temper. Family members later recalled episodes of harsh discipline, with stories of Richard being beaten and at times tied to a cemetery crucifix as punishment. The Ramirez home sat on Lido Street, surrounded by the noise of rail yards and the tension of gang activity. Police sirens and the sight of abandoned lots became part of Richard's daily backdrop. From early childhood, Richard was described as sickly, suffering from convulsions, and what his sister called epileptic seizures, though no medical records confirm a diagnosis. These episodes left him withdrawn, and by age 10, he had started drinking and smoking marijuana. The atmosphere at home offered little comfort. Mercedes worked long hours in a boot factory, and the children learned to keep their heads down. A powerful influence arrived in the form of his older cousin Miguel, a Vietnam veteran who moved in when Richard was 12. Miguel brought with him stories and Polaroid photos of wartime atrocities, images of violence and death that he shared freely with his young cousin. Family and neighbors remember a boy who became more distant, spending hours alone in his room, isolated from the world outside. The combination of instability at home, exposure to trauma, and a lack of support began to shape Richard's view of what was possible and acceptable. By the time he reached adolescence, the groundwork for detachment and trouble had already been laid. By his mid-teens, Richard Ramirez was already known in El Paso as a petty thief. He dropped out of Jefferson High School in the 9th grade, earning the nickname Ricky the Klepto for his habit of slipping through open windows and quietly emptying drawers. Ramirez spent days alone, surviving on junk food and cola, his hygiene slipping as he withdrew further from family and classmates. He avoided organized gangs, but his skill at breaking and entering grew with every job. Juvenile arrests for theft landed him briefly in a Texas youth camp, but no real intervention followed. At age 22, Ramirez left Texas behind. In 1982, he boarded a bus for California, carrying little more than a duffel bag and a growing dependency on cocaine. The move offered anonymity and new opportunities, but it also deepened his isolation. He drifted from cheap motels to friends' couches, sometimes sleeping in abandoned buildings. Burglaries became a way to support his drug habit, and his methods grew bolder, targeting houses at night, learning how to move quietly through darkened rooms, and escape before anyone could react. By the early 1980s, Ramirez's criminal activity had shifted from adolescent mischief to calculated nocturnal break-ins. The pattern of prowling, stealing, and feeding his addiction set the stage for what was to come. The groundwork for his later crimes was already in place, a young man untethered and increasingly driven by compulsion, roaming the streets of California after dark. Between June 1984 and August 1985, a series of violent home invasions swept through the neighborhoods of Los Angeles and the Bay Area. The unknown assailant struck at night, slipping through unlocked doors and windows while residents slept. He carried no single weapon, sometimes a .22 caliber handgun, other times a machete, a knife, or a tire iron. The unpredictability of his tools and his targets left investigators with few clear patterns to follow. Reports documented at least 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. The attacks spanned dozens of miles, from Glassell Park in the northeast to Lakewood near Long Beach and north to San Francisco. Victims ranged in age from children to the elderly, with no obvious connection between them. Some homes were ransacked for jewelry or cash, while others were left untouched, except for the violence inflicted. The only consistent feature was the timing. Each assault happened after midnight, often in the hours just before dawn. The press soon coined a name for the faceless predator, the Night Stalker. The moniker captured not just the nocturnal pattern, but the sense of dread that settled over entire communities. Residents began double-locking doors, nailing windows shut, and sleeping with lights on. Police departments across Los Angeles County and beyond scrambled to compare notes, searching for links among the growing list of crime scenes. The randomness of the attacks, the range of methods, and the absence of a clear victim profile made the investigation especially difficult. With each new report, the sense of unease deepened. The Night Stalker seemed to move without logic, striking in one suburb and then another, sometimes committing multiple crimes in a single night. Forensic evidence, including shoe prints, bullet casings, and fingerprints, would eventually connect the dots, but in the summer of 1985, the pattern itself was the only warning. The city waited in fear, never knowing where the next attack might come. Jenny Vinkow's neighbors on Chapman Street woke to police tape and whispered rumors. At 79, Jenny had lived quietly, her days filled with phone calls to her son and trips to the corner store. Her murder in June 1984 brought a sudden, chilling spotlight to a community that had always felt safe. Friends left flowers on her porch, but fear settled in for good. News of the killing spread quickly. People who once left windows open at night now walked the block in pairs, locking doors behind them even on hot summer evenings. Months later, the violence reached families like the Zazzaras in Whittier. Vincent, a retired grocer, and Maxine, a homemaker, were found by their adult children after a brutal attack. Their house, once a gathering place for Sunday dinners, became a crime scene. The Zazzara's children spoke at the trial, their voices steady but their grief unmistakable. They described a family torn apart, a loss that rippled through every holiday and birthday that followed. Survivors carried scars both visible and hidden. Whitney Bennett was 16 when she woke to a stranger in her Sierra Madre bedroom, the blow from a tire iron leaving her with 478 stitches and a story she would have to retell in court. Her parents, once reluctant to speak publicly, joined local efforts to support other affected families. In Monterey Park, Lillian Doy, recovering from a gunshot wound and sexual assault, testified with the help of her adult son. Communities organized vigils and neighborhood patrols, determined to reclaim a sense of safety. The randomness of the attacks meant that no one felt immune. Each victim's story became a warning, and each survivor's recovery a rallying point. As the list of names grew, so did the urgency to find whoever was responsible. The fear was real, but so was the resolve to see an end to the terror. Detectives worked around the clock, piecing together fragments from dozens of crime scenes. A .22 caliber bullet casing linked separate attacks, and a rare Avia sneaker print, size 11.5, began showing up on blood-stained carpets and garden beds. Lab technicians matched the shoe to only one pair sold in Los Angeles, narrowing the search. By late August 1985, a fingerprint lifted from a stolen car finally produced a name: Richard Ramirez. Police released his mugshot to every newspaper and broadcast station in the city. The next morning, as Ramirez stepped off a Greyhound bus in East Los Angeles, neighbors recognized him instantly. Shouts of El Matan spread down the block. Residents chased him through yards and over fences, cornering him until officers arrived. The manhunt that had gripped California for months ended not with a SWAT raid, but with a community refusing to let terror rule their streets. In July 1988, Richard Ramirez entered a Los Angeles courtroom to face charges that would define his legacy. The trial lasted more than a year, drawing crowds and media attention with every appearance. Ramirez often sat motionless, sometimes raising a hand to reveal a pentagram drawn on his palm, whispering phrases about Satan. On September 20th, 1989, the jury delivered its verdict: guilty on all counts, including 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. The judge imposed 19 death sentences, calling Ramirez's crimes cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. Appeals stretched on for years, but Ramirez remained on death row at San Quentin State Prison. He never expressed remorse, granting interviews and attracting letters from admirers. On June 7, 2013, before the state could carry out his sentence, Richard Ramirez died of complications from B-cell lymphoma. He was 53 years old, having spent nearly half his life behind bars. Decades later, the scars Ramirez left on Los Angeles communities remain. As headlines shift, the need for vigilance in protecting the vulnerable never fades. Evil adapts, but so must our resolve. Behind every statistic is a life forever changed. Share your thoughts below. Let's keep the conversation going.